For 7 years, our marriage was a quiet partnership built on trust, or so I thought. My wife, Rachel, a driven 33-year-old, had recently soared in her career, landing a new job that seemed to invigorate her ambitions. At first, I admired her determination, but over the past 2 years, subtle shifts began to creep in, pulling at the threads of our once solid bond. It started innocently enough, an offhand comment about a coworker she found insufferable. She called him arrogant, even mocking his demeanor. But as weeks turned into months, her disdain softened. She stopped mentioning him altogether. Looking back, that silence should have screamed volumes, but love often blinds us to the obvious. A month ago, the fabric of our marriage began to tear. Rachel's phone, once casually left on the kitchen counter, became an extension of her hand, guarded with the ferocity of a hawk. She started working late more often, her nights and weekends suddenly occupied. At home, she became distant, her warmth replaced with an unfamiliar chill. I tried to dismiss my doubts. Surely, after all these years, we were stronger than this. But the lies began piling up, small, seemingly inconsequential lies that gnawed at my trust. When Rachel packed for a business trip, I noticed a swimsuit tucked into her luggage, far more revealing than anything she had ever worn. She brushed off my questioning with an excuse so thin it was almost laughable. And yet, I wanted to believe her. When she left for that trip, I decided enough was enough. Throughout our relationship, I had never crossed the line into snooping. But that evening, frustration overwhelmed me. I rifled through her belongings, desperate for clarity. In her work bag, I found it. A caricature-like sketch of Rachel, drawn on hotel paper, along with a post-it note in her handwriting. The note wasn't just idle scribbling, it contained directions to her coworker's house. My heart raced. Every fiber of my being screamed for answers. Reviewing our joint bank account revealed dinner receipts from places she claimed were work meetings. How could she have lied so effortlessly? As a private investigator by trade, I knew what to do next. Legally, I placed a GPS tracker in her car, our car titled in my name. When she returned from the trip, I observed her movements closely. That Sunday, she claimed to be grabbing coffee and running errands. Yet the tracker told a different story. Her car went nowhere near a cafe. Hours later, Rachel walked in with a Chipotle cup in hand. Her alibi crumbled before my eyes. Tuesday came and she said she'd be working late for a company dinner. The tracker again betrayed her words, revealing she left work at 3:20 p.m. and didn't return home until after 9 p.m. But it was Saturday that shattered the last threads of my patience. We had planned to watch my niece's tennis match at 8 a.m. Rachel insisted on driving separately, claiming she needed to head straight to a coffee shop afterward for work. Something in her tone felt rehearsed. Feigning indifference, I said, "Have a good day." Then, I checked the GPS. She didn't head to a coffee shop. She drove straight to a Comfort Inn motel. I followed. Parking discreetly, I waited in a nearby lot, my hands gripping the steering wheel. As the minutes crawled by, a nauseating realization settled over me. This wasn't just suspicion, it was reality. I called her from the motel lobby. "How's the coffee shop?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "It's good," she replied, her tone light but cautious. "Why are you asking?" I hesitated for a moment, then said, "Come downstairs. We need to talk." The elevator doors opened, and there she was, her face a mask of feigned surprise. "It's not what you think," she stammered. He has to do this because he's been caught with other women before. We're just working here to avoid distractions." Her words were hollow, a desperate attempt to rewrite the obvious. I didn't say much, just opened the car door and told her to leave. "Go home, Rachel. I'll talk to you later." She began calling me incessantly. I finally answered on the 50th ring. "If you lie to me once," I warned, "this conversation ends." Rachel admitted they had kissed. Once, 5 months ago. "It was a mistake," she pleaded. "It meant nothing." Then came the trickle of truths. She'd met him in hotel rooms at least 10 times over the past 9 months. But when pressed about her whereabouts that previous Tuesday, her defenses returned in full force. Her denials, her tears, they didn't sway me. That night, I packed my things, loaded my dog into my car, and left. The voice recorder I had discreetly placed in our home captured fragments of a conversation that I can never forget. Rachel's voice was light, almost carefree, as if she were talking to an old friend. But the words weren't innocent. I didn't catch every detail, but enough pieces fit together to shatter what little hope I had left. She and her lover discussed the state of our marriage, something she had previously claimed he knew nothing about. They spoke about using a secret phone app to avoid being caught, a calculated step in their deception. Then came the part that stung the most. She mocked me. She laughed about my supposed lateness to breakfast, spinning it as some flaw in my character. Her voice, filled with laughter and joy, felt alien to me. I couldn't remember the last time she had sounded so alive, so happy. Their conversation shifted to lighter topics, punctuated by laughter and banter. It was as if I was listening to a version of Rachel I hadn't known in years, a version of her she had reserved for someone else. That evening, I confronted her. The fight was inevitable. When pressed, she admitted to some parts of the affair, but denied others. It was the same exhausting dance of half-truths and deflections. By the end of it, I realized I didn't have the energy to keep fighting for answers. The next morning, I made a decision that I should have made long ago. I scheduled a meeting with a divorce lawyer. Over the following fortnight, I kept my distance. I needed time to think and space to breathe. Rachel, however, wasn't ready to let me go. She reached out through a text, asking to talk. Her message was vague, but the desperation in her words was clear. I responded with a condition. If she wanted to talk, she would have to come clean about everything. No half-truths, no omissions. For once, I needed honesty from her. Rachel hesitated, but eventually agreed. When we met, I told her I already knew everything. A bluff meant to push her into confessing. I claimed there was a wiretap on her phone, a lie she seemed to believe. Her confession, when it finally came, was a mixture of relief and devastation. She admitted that her affair with him had been physical, stretching back 6 months. She revealed that on the day before our anniversary, she had booked a hotel room for a rendezvous with him. Even after I caught them at the motel, their communication had continued. She claimed he had been helping her manage my questions, as if I were the problem in this scenario. She insisted that the affair was over, that she had ended it for good. Rachel said she wanted to repair our marriage, but her words felt hollow. She framed her delayed confession as an attempt to protect both of us from further pain. But it was clear to me that she had only come clean because I had backed her into a corner. The damage she had caused in those 6 weeks after I caught her felt insurmountable. Every lie, every omission chipped away at what little remained of our relationship. Update: we eventually divorced. The decision wasn't immediate. I took time to weigh everything, to consider whether reconciliation was even possible. In hindsight, I wish I hadn't waited as long as I did. Rachel claimed she wanted to stay together, but her reasoning never made sense to me. Her constant lies and manipulations left no room for trust. Moving forward together would have been impossible. Reflecting on our marriage, I see now how one-sided it truly was. I gave everything to Rachel, my time, my love, my loyalty. I wasn't perfect, but I tried my best to make her happy. Meanwhile, she drained me, taking more than I could ever give. Toward the end of our marriage, I started to believe her words when she criticized me. She undermined my confidence, making me feel inadequate in every aspect of my life, my career, my personality, even my appearance. But since the divorce, I've rediscovered myself. My business has flourished, and I've met women who treat me with the respect I never received from Rachel. I used to think I wasn't attractive, but now I've had beautiful, confident women approach me in bars. The divorce itself was contentious. Despite being the one who betrayed me, Rachel fought over every dollar. I accepted less than half of our assets just to keep the process smooth, but even that wasn't enough for her. Her entitlement only reinforced my decision to leave. Losing her family was difficult. I genuinely cared for many of them, and it hurt to let them go. But I knew that cutting ties with Rachel meant accepting this loss as well. Before the divorce was finalized, I sent all the evidence of her affair to her lover's wife. Though she never responded, I respect her silence. I hope she found some clarity in the truth I gave her. For anyone navigating the nightmare of infidelity, my advice is this: prioritize yourself. Distance yourself from the toxicity, seek professional support, and surround yourself with people who genuinely care. Healing takes time, but it's possible. My darkest days are behind me now. Every morning, I wake up with a sense of freedom and happiness I hadn't felt in years. If you're facing similar struggles, know that there's light on the other side. Whenever one of Rachel's lies was uncovered, she always had a way of turning the conversation, offering hollow assurances of her love for me. She managed to convince me time and again that despite her manipulation and dishonesty, she wasn't the kind of woman who would betray her family. Somehow, she made me believe her. Last year, she became pregnant again, and against my better judgment, I let myself hope. Maybe this child would be mine. Maybe it would be a chance for us to rebuild what had been fractured. But when our daughter was born, the truth was undeniable. Her features were unmistakably multi-ethnic, a truth that no amount of denial or excuses could erase. I refused to sign the birth certificate. It wasn't out of spite, but I couldn't ignore reality any longer. I demanded a paternity test, desperate to confirm what I already suspected. When the results came back, the confirmation hit like a sledgehammer. Neither of the children I had raised as my own were biologically mine. That day was the turning point. The moment I saw those test results, I initiated divorce proceedings and walked away from the life I had spent years building. It felt as if the very foundation of my existence had crumbled beneath me. Leaving wasn't just about me. I knew it would tear Rachel's son apart to watch me go. For 6 years, I had been his father in every way that mattered, or so I thought. I had been there for him, loving him unconditionally, and pouring every ounce of effort into being the best dad I could be. But now when I look at him, I feel an overwhelming sense of revulsion, not toward him, but toward the situation, toward the lies Rachel wrapped us both in. He's just an innocent child, but he's become a living reminder of her betrayal. I am repulsed by what she did, by the years I spent blind to the truth, and by the realization that my life during those years amounted to nothing more than a lie. And yet people, strangers, acquaintances, even friends, don't see it that way. They call me a monster for leaving him behind. Since I moved out, Rachel has weaponized him against me. She has him call me at all hours, crying and pleading for his daddy to come back. She paraded him into the room on the day I packed my belongings, demanding that I look at the damage I was causing. Both online and in person, every time his name is mentioned, I'm met with criticism. To everyone else, it doesn't matter that I'm not his biological father. In their eyes, I should have stayed, no matter the cost to my sanity or dignity. The only support I've found has been from my parents. They understand the depth of my pain, the betrayal that's consumed my life. My siblings, however, have branded me heartless for leaving a child like this. To them, my feelings of devastation, anger, and sorrow are secondary to the fact that a child is involved. I know it's not his fault. I know that the man he called Dad for 6 years walked out of his life. But why does that mean I have to ignore my own pain? Why does it mean I'm expected to sacrifice my life and my emotions to keep up a facade? I wasn't his biological father, but I loved him as if I were. And yet, staying in that role now would only lead to bitterness and resentment. I would come to despise not just Rachel, but myself. He is not my child. And while none of this is his fault, that doesn't change the truth of the situation. Yes, I explained everything to him. I sat him down and told him the truth, that I wasn't his biological father, that his mother had deceived me, and that he bore no responsibility for what happened. I told him I think highly of him, that I don't blame him for any of this. But I can't stay in his life. Rachel's lies have poisoned everything. Every time I see him, I see those 6 years of deception, of being manipulated and taken advantage of. I don't hate him. How could I? He's just an innocent child. But the pain and resentment that Rachel has caused are too overwhelming to ignore. Staying would only prolong the suffering for both of us. Sharing this story hasn't been easy, but it's brought me a small measure of clarity. I know many people won't understand my decision. They'll accuse me of being cold or selfish, but I hope at the very least they'll try to see things from my perspective. Some have claimed my story is fake, citing legal arguments and claiming that what I'm going through is impossible. To those people, I have nothing to say. I'm in the process of disestablishing paternity, a legal challenge to remove myself from the obligations Rachel's lies placed on me. This won't silence the doubters, but it's the truth. Lastly, to those who've sent me kind words, thank you. Your messages, whether in the comments or direct chats, have brought me comfort during one of the darkest periods of my life. I'm not proud of the anger I feel toward Rachel. I know the language I've used to describe her is harsh, but it reflects the reality I'm living in right now. I've been betrayed on a level I never imagined possible, and I'm still trying to find my footing in the aftermath. This is my truth, painful as it may be, and for now, it's the only thing I have. This is an unfiltered outpouring of emotions from a flawed man navigating a complex and painful situation. My intention isn't to make people hate women or perpetuate a message about women being terrible. That's not the goal of this post. I understand why some may take issue with the words I've used to describe my situation, and I accept that as valid criticism of how I've handled my emotions. I came here to vent, to grieve, and to find a way to cope with the tangled mess of feelings that have consumed me over the past month. In doing so, I've found a space where I can speak openly and honestly that has brought me a surprising sense of relief. For that, I am grateful to everyone who has taken the time to read, comment, and share their thoughts. We were first together when we were both 22, just after college. Initially, I was simply a friend to her, until we both ended up working in the same city, and I decided to ask her out. For 9 months, we dated, and during that time, I truly believed she might be the one. But something changed. She became distant without warning, and I couldn't understand why. She told me she never wanted anything serious back then, as she had dreams of pursuing her master's degree in the United States. While I was looking for something serious, she dismissed my intentions as neediness and implied I should just be grateful for the chance to be with her. She was popular and undeniably attractive, and at the time, I was still working on building my confidence. Her attitude fed into my insecurities, even as I tried to convince myself I was becoming the kind of person someone would want to build a life with. We stayed in touch over the years due to mutual friends. Between the ages of 23 and 27, I watched as she dated different men. At one point, her parents even tried to arrange a marriage for her, but nothing came of it. Eventually, when she was 27, she reached out to me. One thing led to another, and we began dating again. At the start, she asked if I was interested in something serious. I told her that I had never dated casually, but I wasn't in a rush to get married. I made it clear that if she felt pressured to marry quickly, she should pursue someone else. The next 6 months were incredible. Honestly, they were some of the best months of my life. She was sweet, thoughtful, and our connection was amazing, both emotionally and physically. But then she brought up marriage. I told her I wasn't ready. Many of our friends had gone through divorces, and I didn't want to make the same mistake. I wanted to be sure before taking such a big step. She accused me of lying about my intentions. I showed her messages where I had clearly stated I was serious about the relationship, but wasn't ready for marriage yet. She argued that we had been dating for over a year in total, and that she was eager to settle down. Things shifted after that. Despite my efforts to keep the connection alive, sending her sweet texts and trying to make plans, she became distant. She stopped replying to messages and showed little interest in meeting up. A month later, she gave me an ultimatum: either marry her or move on. She claimed she could easily find someone else and said I was lucky to have her. Hearing those words hurt. They reminded me of past experiences, times when I had felt less than. While I cared for her deeply, I told her I couldn't be pressured into marriage. We ended the relationship. A month later, she reached out again. Slowly, we rekindled things, and for the past 3 months, she has been back to her sweet and affectionate self. She admitted that she had been wrong to say she could easily find someone else, and said she now believed I was the right person for her. She reiterated her desire to marry me, but promised to wait until I was ready, even acknowledging that her parents were pressuring her to settle down. And yet, something doesn't feel right. Her ability to switch so quickly between being sweet and distant leaves me uneasy. I can't shake the feeling that her sweetness now is simply an attempt to persuade me to marry her. While I still care for her, I'm starting to wonder if this relationship is sustainable. Marriage should feel natural, not forced. The day after I posted about this, the thoughtful comments I received helped me realize something I should have known all along. This wasn't going to work. Last Saturday, I made the decision to end things. That morning, I called her. I explained that I couldn't handle the abrupt shifts in her behavior. I told her that she deserved someone who aligned with her timeline, but I couldn't be pressured into marriage. I admitted it hurt when she claimed she was out of my league and reminded her that I wanted a partner who saw me as an equal. I tried to end things on good terms and wished her well. Her reaction was pure anger. She accused me of never loving her, attacking my insecurities in ways that cut deeply. The conversation spiraled, and despite my attempts to remain calm, it ended on a bitter note. Later, she sent me a text saying she wanted to end things on better terms, but it was clear the damage had already been done. She suggested coming over so we could have a productive conversation about our relationship. When she arrived, I was taken aback by how beautiful she looked, more radiant than I'd seen her in a long time. Her appearance only complicated my feelings, but I resolved to keep the discussion honest and open. We agreed to share criticisms without holding back. I started by acknowledging her complaint about how much I prioritized work, admitting that I had let my focus on my career overshadow other aspects of my life. Then, I brought up something that had been gnawing at me, her comment about being able to find someone better. I told her how much it hurt, emphasizing that such thoughts had no place in a loving relationship. She surprised me by admitting she was wrong. She apologized, and then the compliments came pouring in. She told me I was the best man she'd ever dated, that I had qualities she admired deeply, and that she couldn't imagine being with anyone else. Then she asked the question I had been expecting. What can I do to fix things? I was firm in my response. I told her that the relationship was beyond repair. But I also said I was grateful we were having this conversation, ending things without the bitterness that had plagued us before. I made it clear that my decision to break up was final. Nothing would change my mind. Her next move caught me off guard. Out of nowhere, she tried to initiate intimacy. It shocked me because she had always been reluctant in the past, calling certain things disgusting and beneath her. And yet here she was, reaching out to me in a way that felt both unexpected and desperate. Against my better judgment, I gave in. The encounter was passionate, maybe even more so than anything we'd shared before. It was both satisfying and bittersweet, as if it was our way of closing a chapter we both knew was ending. Afterward, she asked me to reconsider. She begged me to take at least until the next day before making my final decision. She assured me she'd do whatever it took to make amends, that she'd prove how much she cared and how deeply she wanted this to work. But I stood my ground. I told her it was over. I explained that I couldn't stay in a relationship where I had to threaten to leave just to feel loved, respected, and appreciated. That's when the tears came. She cried, telling me I'd always been the one for her, the man she had imagined spending her life with. She revealed that some of her friends had expressed interest in me over the years, but she had kept it a secret because she couldn't bear the thought of anyone else having me. Her words tugged at my emotions, but I remained resolute. For over an hour, she pleaded with me, trying every angle to get me to reconsider. I listened, but I knew there was no going back. Eventually, She seemed to accept the truth. Wiping her tears, she gathered her things and left. Later that night, I received a screenshot from a friend. It was an Instagram story she had posted, visible only to her close friends list. I had been part of that list earlier in the week, but clearly I'd been removed. The story was full of bitterness. In it, she accused me of wasting her time and included other passive-aggressive remarks about our relationship. It stung to see, but I knew responding wouldn't help either of us. Instead, I decided to send her a final message. I told her I genuinely hoped everything in her life would turn out the way she wanted. I expressed my desire for us to part ways peacefully and move on without resentment. After sending the message, I blocked her on all platforms. Sitting there afterward, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: sadness for what had been lost, but also relief. For the first time in a long while, I felt free. I was finally ready to look toward the future and find someone who would treat me with kindness, respect, and love for who I truly am. I overheard the girls mentioning something about a foursome. I stood in the living room with a few other guys, all of us exchanging bewildered looks, wondering what on earth was happening behind that closed door. This wasn't my house, and I had no idea what these girls were up to, so I didn't feel comfortable barging in to get my girlfriend. I tried texting her, but got no response. A few minutes passed, and I could still hear them talking inside, which somewhat eased my concern. At one point, one of the girls came out of the room, and I decided this was my chance. I approached the door and went in. I found my girlfriend and expressed my discomfort about the situation, unsure of what was going on, but certain it wasn't anything good. My sudden entrance startled the other two girls, effectively putting an end to whatever this foursome was supposed to be. I told my girlfriend again, "Let's go." She agreed, but asked me to leave the room so she and her friend could get dressed. Reluctantly, I stepped out, waiting in the living room. Minutes passed, but they still hadn't come out. Suspicious, I returned to the door, opened it, and saw something I could never have prepared for. There she was, under the blankets on a filthy bed, with her best friend's head between her legs. I froze for a moment, then blurted out something like, "That's disgusting! What are you doing?" The two of them immediately stopped, both looking mortified. I was trembling with shock, barely able to process what I was seeing. "I'm leaving," I said firmly, and walked out. I put on my shoes, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to leave them there and never look back, but another part couldn't bring myself to abandon these drunk idiots. Against my better judgment, I decided to take them home. I returned to the room and told them to gather their things so we could leave. My girlfriend's friend apologized to me, but I couldn't even find the words to respond. I stayed silent, numb from the situation, and dropped her friend off first before taking my girlfriend home. When we got home, I tried to talk to her. It was almost pointless. She was heavily intoxicated and barely coherent. Still, she seemed to realize she had done something wrong. She fumbled for excuses, claiming that I didn't give her enough attention or engage in a particular activity she enjoyed. We argued for a while. I tried to make her understand how much this had hurt me. Eventually, the discussion tapered off, and we went to bed. The next day, when she was sober, I explained everything to her again. She admitted that she and her friend thought it wouldn't be a big deal because it was just another girl. She said her friend had initiated it and she went along with it, though she admitted she found the situation strange. I told her how upset I was, explaining that it felt like she had cheated on me. While I acknowledged that I would probably be even more upset if it had been another guy, this didn't make it okay. Her actions had crossed a boundary, and I couldn't simply brush it off. She seemed genuinely remorseful, apologizing repeatedly and acting differently than usual for the rest of the day. Her guilt was evident, but it didn't erase what had happened. I understand that what she did is considered cheating, regardless of whether it was with a guy or a girl. What troubles me most is that if I hadn't walked into that room, I might never have found out about this. I told her as much, explaining that I understood why she might have thought it was okay, but I didn't feel the same way. I made it very clear. If something like this were ever to happen again, I would end the relationship without hesitation. Now I'm left questioning myself. Am I being too forgiving? Should I have ended things right then and there? This situation has left me feeling uncertain, both about her and about my own response. What do you think?